Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Key Gripe, the show for short, sweet reviews of new release movies, plus the one thing that annoyed me the most. And today I'm very excited because it's my 50th episode of Key Gripe. I am overly happy and all that to actually be able to make it to 50 episodes, and also a little bit surprised that I did make it to 50 episodes, but given how much I watch movies, it shouldn't be that surprising. And today I'm very excited also because I'm talking about, one of the last movies of the summer season, the last big one that we're talking about, Suicide Squad, the latest installment in the new DCEU, which is what they're calling basically DC's counter to Marvel's MCU. So, Suicide Squad stars Will Smith, Margot Robbie, Viola Davis, Joel Kinnaman, Jai Courtney, Adewale Akinnuoye Agbaje. Yes, I tried it. To name just a few, Cara Delevingne. I cannot say her name either. Her name is harder to say than Adewale's, but I should just call him Mr. Echo. I should always just call him Mr. Echo. But as well as Jared Leto as the Joker. So the basic, and I need to put this out here. There will be spoilers, and also this episode, I'm going to talk about Suicide Squad again in another episode, kind of talking about the state of the DCEU. So not everything that I want to say is going to be said here, but I do want to give a pretty direct review of this movie today. And there will be spoilers. There will absolutely be spoilers. So be warned, because I have a lot to say about this movie. So the basic story is you have a group of both criminals and criminal metahumans who are basically prison at this point for, because they were all caught in various ways, either by Batman or by the Flash. Basically someone caught these guys, doing bad things, and so now they're all in prison. And Viola Davis brings to her superiors basically this proposition that if we need to, we can use these people on our side to, stop terrorist attack, to challenge other metahumans, because obviously you've got Superman flying around. Who's going to be able to stop Superman? They can send, a group like this to challenge them, to challenge Superman, knowing that if they die, it's no loss. They're basically making it's a suicide squad because they're sending them on suicide missions with the hope that, if they die, it's no big loss. So she sets up basically this team, and it's made up of different characters, including Deadshot, who's played by Will Smith, Harley Quinn, who's played by Margot Robbie, Jai Courtney plays Boomerang, Cara Delevingne, why can't I say her name? She plays Enchantress, who's not actually in prison, but she is, somebody that basically Viola Davis, who plays Amanda Waller, she has her basically in her pocket. Like, she can, basically she controls her, essentially. And then she recruits Rick Flag, who's just like, badass soldier, to kind of take control and lead this group, and make sure that they don't do anything stupid. Then you got Adewale playing Killer Croc, who lives underground and all that. And Jay Hernandez plays Diablo, the guy basically who can conjure fire, essentially. So she basically gets this group together, and they don't do anything. At this point, it's more just like, this is who they are. And the movie opens kind of with, here's the team, and this is sort of how they got to where they got. And it focuses mostly on two characters. It focuses mostly on Deadshot and on Harley Quinn. It gives them kind of this deeper backstory. Deadshot basically has a daughter that he wants to basically, see grow up and kind of be her sole parent, because her mom is apparently not a great parent. But he ultimately gets caught by Batman when she really challenges him not to kill people. Like, when his daughter challenges him not to kill people, and so he kind of surrenders to Batman at that point. And then you have Harley Quinn, who also got caught by Batman when she and the Joker were basically going on, a rampage. The Joker kind of got his hooks in her when he was in Arkham, and now, the two of them are kind of, the king and queen of Gotham, really, in terms of crime. So, and Jared Leto plays the Joker very much like a crime lord, um, and not in the sense necessarily of like Heath Ledger's Joker, because he was a crime lord who just did. There really wasn't this like moment where he was, up. I'm gonna get into the Joker in a lot more detail later, but basically he's this, very much a, high roller type of crime lord that, is, very protective of Harley. And then when she gets caught, now it's like the Joker wants to get Harley back. He like treats her like his property essentially, and so while Amanda Waller sets up this team, and now basically at that point there's something that they're trying, and this is where it gets a little muddy, but they're basically trying to do something, and essentially Enchantress gets away from Rick Flag because the two of them are in this sort of like weird romantic relationship. And so when she gets away, she resurrects her brother. Basically, she's like an ancient Mayan goddess almost, this like ancient Mayan witch. And she's able to resurrect her brother. And between the two of them, they want to A, get her heart back, and B, create this machine essentially that will destroy humanity or destroy humanity as it exists and create the world in their image. So very much kind of like an apocalypse, X-Men Apocalypse type of plot. Unfortunately, getting there is really kludgy and broken. So when this happens and they start like destroying Midway City, then the Suicide Squad assembles. And obviously the team they're not interested in helping because, what's in it for them is, they don't really get much in it for them. But they're forced to because they implant an explosive device in their neck. And Adam Beach, who plays Slipknot, essentially shows up and immediately is killed in the span of about 5 minutes because that's how much people care about the character of Slipknot. But just also to prove that this is something that is actually serious. And so they bring this team together and send them into Midway City saying, okay, we need to stop this terrorist attack. But the whole thing is a ruse because they're actually taking them into the city to get Amanda Waller out so that Enchantress doesn't get a hold of her and doesn't get a hold of the heart. But that plan goes completely awry. When they're in the city, they encounter these creatures that are made by Enchantress. She's basically turning regular people into these just like weird, literally faceless zombies. And so as they fight their way and get Waller, her helicopter is ultimately shot down. And it leads them to go, okay, now what do we do? And that's when Deadshot finds out that this whole thing was basically their own fault. They were trying to do something, and I don't even know what they were trying to do is the hard part. I think it was that, when Enchantress awoke her brother, they were trying to go and fight her brother off, and in doing so, they basically gave Enchantress the means to just, go off on her own and create this machine. So it's something that they did, a problem that they created, and now they're forcing the Suicide Squad to clean up the mess, essentially. And even though, they don't want to because they're bad guys, they're all criminals, they have prison sentences that are still in effect, even if they succeed, they don't necessarily want to see, the world get destroyed. Diablo has this moment where he talks about how he got to where he is, and it sort of gives them all this, kind of moment of reflection, and it's like, all right, I guess, maybe we should help out. And so the Suicide Squad goes and fights Enchantress, some more people die, they save Amanda Waller, and in the end, they destroy Enchantress and the machine, but they're still criminals at this point. That no matter what they do or say to get out of this, essentially they're still criminals, and they're still going back to jail when all is said and done. But at the very end of the movie, there's a moment where the Joker breaks into the prison and captures, gets Harley out, and that's obviously that. The post-credit scene is also interesting because it shows Bruce Wayne talking to Amanda Waller, basically saying, if you guys don't figure your issues out, which you created, he and his friends, aka the Justice League, are going to figure it out for them. So there's sort of this like tension, obviously, between Amanda Waller, who's very much a cool and controlled badass, and Bruce Wayne, who's also a cool and controlled badass, but has now a crew of metahumans on his side. So long story short, that is the entire story of Suicide Squad. Now, to explain it like that actually makes it sound like there is a plot there, but the problem is that this movie has no plot at all. It's really weird how they manage. I mean, they start off really well with introducing these characters, giving them some backstory, kind of building up who these people are and how they got to where they ended up. But then it just immediately jumps into the third act situation, which is where the bad guy sort of gets control of whatever the plot that the bad guy is trying to unfold and starts enacting it, and it forces the team to come together and challenge it. So this is basically a first and a third act movie. There is no second act of this movie to build up to that. It just jumps right in. What they try to do, though, is make it out to be this twist. They basically make the second act a twist in the movie. They do this like really short, like brief scene where they kind of set it up, but then when they explain what actually happened, toward the end of the movie, it's like, okay, you should have really done this earlier. I know that you wanted to make this, a really you wanted to make it a surprise, but unfortunately it did not work, because then they're jumping right into third act action, and you're like, I don't know what's going on. It's very, very puzzling how that all works out. And I'm going to go more on that, because that is not my key gripe. My key gripe is much bigger than that. I also a couple of the big things about this movie are going to be, is it going to be humorous? Compared to Batman v Superman, which it definitely was. It had a lot more lighthearted humor, good like sarcasm and stuff like that, some good exchanges. So it definitely had good humor in it. The other question was, were the actors going to portray their characters well? And I'd say for what they were given, the actors absolutely did portray them well. My biggest criticism is of Jared Leto, not necessarily of his ability to take on the Joker character, but just the demeanor of the Joker was so different, and it was a little unsettling for me, because the way I've always seen the Joker is it's just there wasn't this like moment of like reflection. The Joker doesn't have that moment of like sweet, tender reflection almost, but in this movie he does. He also has moments where he's very much in control and very like calm. It just doesn't feel like the Joker that I don't necessarily want to compare it just to Heath Ledger's Joker, because as amazing as that was, it was one interpretation of the Joker. We've also had Jack Nicholson, we've had Cesar Romero, we've had Mark Hamill, who's done an amazing job with the Joker in the animated universe and in video games. So it's not that I don't like that they went in a different direction with the Joker. It's that the demeanor of the Joker in this movie is off. It seems like he's almost too in control, especially given the fact his entire role in this movie is very much about getting Harley back. He wants to get his queen back, and so much of his time is focused on that. And yet he doesn't. It isn't that like absolutely insane Joker. It's more like just an angry Joker. It was very strange. So I wasn't too impressed with their interpretation of the Joker, and maybe with more time and more exposure to this incarnation of the Joker, if we see him again, which I'm sure we will, then obviously things might change. But just in this limited viewing of him, because he's only in the movie for about 15 minutes, he's really not a huge part of this. He's kind of this like lingering thing above Harley Quinn, but he doesn't have a significant role in the plot. There's a moment where he swoops in and basically tries to capture Harley Quinn, get her back, and he is successful in that, but ultimately they fail anyway. His helicopter is shot down, which actually that whole scene is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. When Harley Quinn is basically rescued by the Joker. They all have that implant in their neck that if they try to escape, they'll detonate it and explode. So the Joker goes in and steals the technology to turn off the beacon, basically, or turn off the signal to the grenade. And so he gets that and turns hers off when they hijack a helicopter. And so while they're laying down this Gatling gun cover, which is very reminiscent of something you'd see out of Fury, with the pink bullet chasers, basically, tracers. I said chasers, I meant tracers. But that scene is just really well shot and really cool, of Harley like getting onto like kind of walking toward the helicopter, getting on the rope, and then getting flying away. But in that moment, Amanda Waller tells Deadshot to shoot her. And she says, she'll give him, she basically tries to buy him off with the opportunity to, not only, to basically get his sentence wiped out and to go be with his daughter. So he has this opportunity to basically completely undo everything that that the situation he's in, but he doesn't do it. And it's actually one of my favorite scenes in the movie, just how they put it together visually and just what that scene means. Because one of the things about this movie I wasn't too thrilled with was how they did not push the envelope with these guys being villains. They really did not. And they absolutely didn't do a great job with showing the contrast between the villains and the people who are in control. So there was obviously a lot of tension between Flag, Joel Kinnaman. I love Joel Kinnaman. He played this character perfectly in terms of I don't care how good you guys are. I don't care about all of this. You guys are under my control, and I am. He was very dominant, very commanding. He played that role extremely well, and so there was that tension, especially between him and Deadshot, Will Smith's character. But overall, they never really made these guys out to be the villains we wanted them to be, or the villains that they needed to be for a scene like that to have the impact that it should have had. Of where it's we are villains, we will do bad things all the time, but you are not going to tell us what we get to do. That's kind of the whole message behind them, is that we don't want you to tell us what to do. And we can willingly do it, which is why the ending is so important. They willingly go into this situation to stop Enchantress and her brother. But in terms of being told what to do, that's something else entirely. Especially when they realize the motives that Waller and Rick Flag are using are selfish. That the whole situation was their problem that they created in the first place. So I think that they could have done better with it. That's not to say that they didn't do a terrible job, but I think they could have done more to really push home that conflict between these two. But instead, they did try to make these, because one of the dangers with a movie like this is making out a hero, basically making an anti-hero out of villains. They don't want to go full villain, because they know if they go full villain, audiences might not buy into it. They might be like, I don't like these guys. Deadpool, they didn't go full villain because they know that, Deadpool is not a villain, he's an anti-hero. Movie like Watchmen, though, when they do go full villain, people don't respond to that well, because it's not easy to swallow. And I think that's part of the problem here, is that they didn't want to go full villain to make it difficult to swallow. They wanted to humanize these characters so that at the end you are rooting for them. And I think that was a poor choice, because they could have made these guys really bad people, and yet you could still root for them with a few different choices that they could have made. Because right off the bat in the movie, the first thing you see when they're introducing these characters is how they're being, they're in prison, but they're also being tortured, and they're being, humiliated and all that. It's like, yes, okay, so we know they're bad people, but you're also making us sympathize with them by torturing them and doing all that. So it was kind of challenging in that regard. But again, not my key gripe. I still have a much bigger key gripe. again with the movie, some of the things that I really did like, I thought all the actors did well. The ones who they did focus on, Will Smith, Joel Kinnaman, Viola Davis, Margot Robbie, they did well with what they were given. Now, some of them, like particularly the female characters, were not given a lot to work with. They were given, some, the character of Katana, she had this moment that I liked the moment, but I don't like how they executed it, where she's talking to her basically dead husband's soul in her sword, because her sword takes the souls of whoever it kills. So she's like talking to her dead husband before they go into this fight. And it was a great concept, but just poorly executed, and it really made her out to be just this kind of whining character. Harley Quinn in this movie is just basically a sex symbol for a lot of things, and that doesn't necessarily work too well. And then Viola Davis, probably the best female character in this movie in terms of like having some kind of respect, but they also just kind of say, all you are is this just like cold, calculating person. And even though she plays it well, because Viola Davis is an amazing actress, they just don't give her enough to really work with and to give her character, an extreme amount of depth. But I'd say with the material that they're given, the actors absolutely, knock it out of the park. Even Jai freaking Courtney did well, and that's saying something. He provided some, like comic relief. He was probably like he almost out-crazied the Joker in this movie, which is, as Captain Boomerang, which is kind of disappointing. When you have the Joker in a movie and someone else out-crazies him, that's not fair. And then the action in this movie is spectacular. I gotta give a lot of credit to, some of it, obviously the situations might be silly, but the scene when, they first encounter these, like, drones that Enchantress has created in the street. When they first encounter these drones, it's an awesome fight, but at the end of that fight, they basically, Deadshot decides, we're not going to leave these guys to die. We are going to actually, like, do what we're supposed to do, like, actually contribute here. When he shows up and just, like, starts taking these things down, it's a thing of beauty. That scene is so well done. The end fight scene with Enchantress is also really well done, because even though it's highly CGI, it does have this really cool, like, almost like fighting in a fog type like idea. It's very cool and really well done. A lot of the fighting in that movie is really well choreographed, and the actors absolutely play it well. So got to give them credit for the action in this movie. It was really intense. But when they said that this is like unlike anything you've ever seen, ultimately they were wrong. It's like a lot of things we've seen. So, alright, I've been touching on it, but I haven't actually gone to my key gripe for this movie. And this is a pretty significant gripe, because I've talked about how, they didn't write the characters very well, or they didn't write the female characters very well, or they didn't write the story very well, or, this thing was just riddled with cliches and cliche dialogue and all this stuff. So what's the biggest gripe about that? David Ayer, the director and writer of this movie. I put all of the blame entirely on him. Now, I am not somebody who's going to look at David Ayer and say this guy is a hack, because he has either written or directed some of the coolest movies of the last 20 years. He wrote Fast and the Furious, which, you could say, the first Fast and the Furious was a good movie. He also wrote Training Day. He directed Harsh Times. He directed Street Kings, which is one of the most underrated movies of the last 15 years, I think. It's a fantastic movie. He wrote Dark Blue. He directed Fury, End of Watch. He has such a good cadre of movies under his belt that he's done. And yet, this movie feels so much like some of those other movies that he's tried to do. But one of the big themes about those other movies is they are movies that focus on kind of the line between right and wrong in police forces and stuff. Like Training Day is the perfect example of where his head is, of what kind of movies he does well. Training Day is a perfect example of that, where you have that, it's such a blurred line between right and wrong, between good and bad. And so to put him in this movie is perfect, because he already deals with that, of like that towing the line between right and wrong. The problem is that those movies don't need to have a coherent plot necessarily, because it's about they're smaller, intimate movies about maybe the relationship between two characters. And that's, I mean, really what he's done throughout all of his movies. You've got Training Day is about two characters, Harsh Times is about two characters, End of Watch, two characters. Fury, even though it's got, a number of characters in that tank, really the focus is on Brad Pitt and Logan Lerman. So, I mean, he does that so well. And even here, he does that with, Deadshot and Rick Flag. Like, those are the two characters he wants to focus on. The problem is when you are doing something that's like intimate and more about this character relationship, if that's all it is just how these two characters interact, that's fine. You don't need to have a crazy plot. But when you're doing a comic book movie, you do need to have some kind of coherent plot with, logical sense. And here, he did not do that. He completely skipped the second act of this movie in favor of just doing one long, hour-long third act, essentially. And it didn't work. It made the plot so muddled and ugly and incoherent that it's like, I mean, people complained about Batman v Superman being incoherent, but at least in that movie, you're able to parse out, there are some, essentially, you can figure out the plot of that movie. It's ugly, it's kludgy, but you can figure it out. This movie, they just jump right into it. They ignore any kind of really real build-up or any of that. It just like kind of jumps right into it. It's so bad. And again, with the female characters, none of the movies that he's done in the past have had strong female characters. And I hate the trope that in order to make a female character strong, she just has to kick ass. So it's like, Margot Robbie, she's sexy, she can kick ass, so that makes her strong. No, it doesn't. Making her strong, the moment that actually showed her actually being somewhat strong is in the bar scene, but in that scene, actually, most of the characters actually get a little bit of, depth to them. But it takes the entire movie to get there, to get to any kind of depth for, these characters, especially the female characters. But then there's also moments that are, like, completely sexist, and, without trying to use that word too liberally, it just goes back to those old tropes of, like, here's a sexy woman, haha, cute, and it just doesn't work. But that's what Ayer has done. It's always been about these very masculine-driven characters and roles, so that he doesn't know how to write female roles well. And in this movie, that was a huge loss because you had 3 great female characters that he could have drawn upon. I'm leaving Enchantress out because I don't know enough about her character, and I really was not interested in her character in the least. But you've got the other 3 characters. You've got Katana, you've got Harley Quinn, and you got Amanda Waller. Those are characters that you can build on and make them really strong and great, dynamic characters. And he didn't. He did not even attempt to do that, which really irritated me. This movie needed a second writer. It needed somebody who actually has written movies like this to keep David Ayer in check, because he clearly has not done his homework on comic book movies, and it's putting us back into the same kind of tropes that we've seen before. It's the only difference between this and Apocalypse is this one doesn't have a second act. At least Apocalypse has a second act. This one doesn't. So David Ayer, I love the guy. I love what he's done with other movies, but he is the reason this movie is not as good as it could have been. This is the reason this movie, the potential was just completely squandered. It's entirely his fault, because the actors did what they needed to do. The action, the visual effects, all that stuff is great. Even the soundtrack of just like all these random songs is great. But he just does not know how to build a comic book narrative. And especially with a movie like Civil War out now, it makes it look even worse, because it looks like an amateur was trying to put this together. And when you watch some of the scenes of, some of the dialogue and some of the scenes in this movie, it really is amateur writing. And that's what made this movie less than great. So my big key gripe is David Ayer on this one. No question, hands down. So overall, I'd give this movie a 6 out of 10 because, like I said, they did a lot of things right, but there was a big glaring hole in this movie that is the director's responsibility to make sure that that hole is filled, and he did not do it. He did not handle it right. So 6 out of 10 for Suicide Squad. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Let me know your thoughts on the movie, if you liked it, if you disliked it. Otherwise, that is my review of Suicide Squad, and this is my 50th episode of Key Gripe. So thanks a lot for watching and supporting my show. I'll see you guys later. Love ya. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to keep up on all of my YouTube videos by clicking subscribe, and if you're already a subscriber, thank you, and you rock. Also visit my homepage at dkessner.com, where you can find out about all my various other projects, including my written works. How about that? You can also find me at my social media handles, so drop in and say hi. And again, thank you so much for all your support. Love you.